This is the story of how a stranger's hate nearly broke me, and how it accidentally made me stronger. Watch until the end for a powerful reflection on healing, identity, and strength. I used to believe that life-changing moments arrived with warning signs, sirens, dramatic pauses, maybe even a feeling in your chest that something big was about to happen. I was wrong. Sometimes, they come disguised as ordinary days, wrapped in routine, hiding inside a single word spoken by someone you will never see again. Mine arrived on a Wednesday afternoon. The kind of Wednesday that felt invisible. I remember the weather first. It was warm but not oppressive, the sky a pale blue washed thin by the sun. I had just left my job at a logistics company downtown, where I worked as a junior operations coordinator. The job wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and at that stage of my life, stability mattered more than passion. I was 27, renting a modest apartment, sending money home to my parents when I could, and convincing myself that I'm getting there counted as progress. That afternoon, I decided to walk instead of taking the bus. I wanted air, I wanted movement, I wanted something to interrupt the endless loop of emails, spreadsheets, and polite workplace smiles. I stopped at a small convenience store on the corner, one I'd passed 100 times. The bell jingled as I entered. I grabbed a bottle of water and a granola bar, paid at the counter, nodded at the cashier, and stepped back outside. That's when it happened. I was halfway down the sidewalk when I heard footsteps behind me, fast, irritated. Before I could fully register what was happening, a voice cut through the air. "Watch where you're going, you stupid slur." A word I'd heard before. A word that didn't belong to me, but had been thrown at people who looked like me for generations. A word heavy with history, hatred, and violence. For a split second, my brain refused to process it. It felt like my ears had glitched, like the sound had arrived out of order. I turned. The man was white, maybe mid-40s, wearing a faded baseball cap and work boots. He looked ordinary, unremarkable, the kind of person you'd never remember if he hadn't just altered the course of your life. Our eyes met. There was no apology, no embarrassment, just irritation, as if I had inconvenienced him by existing in the same space. "Move," he snapped, brushing past me. And then he was gone. I stood there, frozen, holding a plastic bag with water and a granola bar like it was proof that I was real. People walked by. A couple laughed. A woman talked loudly on her phone. Traffic flowed. The world did not stop. But something inside me did. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't chase him down. I didn't deliver a perfect, movie-worthy comeback. I did nothing. And that, more than the word itself, haunted me. For the rest of the walk home, my body felt disconnected from my mind. My heart beat too fast. My hands shook slightly. I replayed the moment over and over, imagining what I should have said. "You don't know me. You can't talk to me like that. Say it again." But silence had been my response. Silence and shock. By the time I reached my apartment, I felt exhausted, as if I'd run miles instead of walking 6 blocks. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the word echoing in my head. I'd experienced subtle racism before, dismissive looks, backhanded compliments, assumptions wrapped in politeness. But this was different. This was raw, unfiltered, unashamed. What unsettled me most was how small it made me feel. I started questioning things I'd never questioned before. Had I walked too slowly? Was I in his way? Did I somehow deserve that anger? These thoughts embarrassed me. I prided myself on being confident, educated, rational. Yet there I was, internalizing someone else's hatred like it was a personal failing. I didn't tell anyone. Not my friends. Not my coworkers. Not my family. I told myself it wasn't worth the conversation. That it would just make things heavier. That it was just one guy. But the truth was simpler. I didn't want to relive it out loud. In the weeks that followed, I noticed changes in myself. I walked faster in public spaces. I avoided eye contact with strangers. I became hyper-aware of how much space I took up. At work, I hesitated before speaking in meetings, worried about being seen as aggressive or difficult. When someone interrupted me, I let it happen. I laughed off jokes that made me uncomfortable. I softened my opinions. I made myself smaller. All because of one word from a stranger who didn't even know my name. That realization made me angry. Not at him, but at myself. The turning point came 3 months later, during a company training session. We were split into small groups for a discussion about workplace communication. The facilitator asked us to share a moment when miscommunication had impacted us. The room was quiet, people shifted in their seats. And without planning to, I raised my hand. When I started speaking, my voice shook. I told them about the stranger, about the slur, about how it followed me into my workplace, my thoughts, my confidence. The room was silent when I finished. Then something unexpected happened. One colleague spoke up, then another. Stories came out, about harassment, prejudice, moments they'd buried because they didn't think anyone wanted to hear them. For the first time, I realized my silence hadn't protected me. It had isolated me. That day changed something. I began talking about it, with friends, with mentors, with my family. Each time I told the story, it lost a bit of its power over me. I started reading, about history, about resilience, about racism, about people who had faced far worse and still stood tall. I joined a local community group focused on dialogue and education, not because I wanted to be an activist, but because I wanted to understand and be understood. Slowly, I stopped shrinking. I spoke up in meetings again. I corrected people when they made assumptions. I took up space without apologizing for it. Not aggressively, not defensively, but confidently. What that stranger never knew, and never will, is that his word became a mirror. It forced me to see how deeply society teaches certain people to feel entitled to space, comfort, and dominance, and how others are taught to be grateful for tolerance. It showed me that racism isn't just about hatred. It's about permission, the permission to dehumanize without consequence. But it also taught me something else. That power doesn't always belong to the loudest voice in the moment. Sometimes, it belongs to the person who survives the impact, and chooses what to do with it. I used to think strength meant confrontation. Standing your ground, fighting back. Now I know it can also mean reflection. Growth, refusing to let someone else define your worth. The word still stings when I think about it. I won't pretend it doesn't. But it no longer defines me. Instead, it reminds me of who I became because of it. Someone more aware, more intentional, more grounded in my identity. I don't know that man's name. I don't know where he is now. He probably forgot the encounter before the end of that block. But I remember, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Because that day taught me that even the ugliest moments can become turning points. That pain, when acknowledged and processed, can become direction. And that sometimes, a stranger's cruelty can unintentionally push you toward your strongest, most authentic self. Today, I walk slower when I want to. I speak when I have something to say. I take up space without apology. I no longer confuse silence with peace. And if another stranger ever tries to reduce me to a word, I know this. My life is bigger than their hatred. My voice is stronger than their ignorance. And my story doesn't end where their anger begins. Because when a stranger called me a slur, my life did change forever. Just not in the way he intended. Pain didn't end my story, it rewrote it. And yours is still being written. Words can wound, but they can also wake us up. If stories like this matter to you, stay with us. Subscribe for real stories that remind us we're not alone. Thank you for watching.